dinner with our son who lives here, the one who lives here, and it was just wonderful. Even it was just the three of us, wonderful. It was complete. Well, there were more than three. I rather think God was present too. So it was lovely. I hope the rest of you had a lovely day too. Yeah. Well, let
Yeah.
let's do some searching around a little bit here. If you have handy, um, and you can look at. Let me see. Where am I? Oh, I've got myself off because or off the screen.
No, you were showing it
Going
just
there and
right, John. There you go.
yeah, yeah. You remember this? This is, I think, yeah. Can you see it? Oh, the light's weird. Anyway, this is that chronological sheet that I made up of some select um, mystics that I've been particularly bringing up from time to time, and hopefully in a systematic way, nonetheless. So you would recognize this perhaps, and if you have it, happen to have it and have it handy, why uh, that might be a little bit helpful for what we're going to be talking about. Um, but if not, I'm sure you, in your mind's eye, you can recall generally what the schema is of the whole thing. Today, the focus is on a particularly complex, and profound period in the history of Christian mystics and mysticism. And it has been called by several biblical scholars and all as the classical period. It stretches from midway in what I call a period two. Remember, I've broken it into three periods because there are ways of identifying the evolution of thinking and even in practice, a mystical practice over time in basically three periods. Now that's my concoction, so others with more sweeping knowledge than I have will perhaps look at that differently. But nonetheless, period two, which is a big long one, it actually covers 700 years from, Hildegard of Bingen, and she was our touchstone mystic for this course. And there were reasons for that. Now that's beginning to be unveiled. And then it continues up through St. John of the Cross. So that's a long period of time of particularly colorful and informative Christian mystics. That period, again, just to kind of remind, I call the period of learning how to live with church doctrine. This was the period of time where there were lots of persecutions of individuals who had even slightly different views or expanding views from the given orthodox views that were that the church had established through this period. The first period was forming those doctrines. So that was back earlier. So that was the first period, forming those. And that's a fascinating era in its own right. And the thrust within that period has a certain quality to it. Now, period two, just as a reminder, is the one learning how to live with the doctrines. Once the doctrines got well established and stated, then everybody had to adjust to that. Now, it wasn't just the church. It was what's called the church triumphant. And that is the church in that great 700-year period was definitely one of the two prime sources of power in Western, well, all of Europe, really, though it wasn't in the arrangement of countries that we have now, obviously, and further. The kingdom of Jesus wasn't formed yet, but it was beginning to be. But that's another subject. I won't go into that. In any case, so living with that, think of people like Joan of Arc. She didn't live with it, but she is a great hero, and now a saint, and considered a great saint of the Roman Catholic Church. but her behavior was brought her a pretty bad ending, as everybody knows, and that was in 1400s. Actually, it was the English who did her in, basically. It wasn't even the French, but in any case, so this was a period that got pretty tough on people who committed heresies, that is, untruths against, that don't jive with the doctrine of the church. I think you all are very aware of that era. The church triumphant, but the matching power, of course, was feudalism, that is the state, which included the overlords, the lords, the lords and masters, the kings, and the emperor or emperors, such as Charlemagne and others. So those two great powers, of course, were constantly jockeying to be the greater power. And how do they get along together? There again is another fascinating history and subject, and it's called feudalism, that whole period. Okay, so that's just a really broad historical reminder on that, which I'm sure all of you are probably quite familiar with and maybe fascinated with. But today, I've reserved for the last 3 centuries, really, of that middle period, the period of adjustment to the doctrines of the church. And as I said, that's called the classical period of mysticism, of Christian mysticism, by many scholars and biblical scholars and the likes. Well, we're going to look a little bit as to why that is today or this evening. And just as an introductory kind of clue as we go in, there is a very gradual shift mentally and collectively that is going on, and actually had been going on for quite a while. But and that is from the early beliefs in creation as expressed in nature. You remember that from Hildegard, from Julian of Norwich, and of course Saint Francis and Saint Clare, and all of those wonderful saints whom we really all love pretty much. Their general mentality, if I may put it that way, was in terms of religious practice and personal beliefs, was in this: we are all a part of God's creation, and therefore honoring that creation by such things as tilling the soil, respecting animals, birds, so on, and certainly plants and flowers, and continuing God's work by the work of our hands. You'll recall that we gave quite a bit of attention to that. And it's very appealing, isn't it, to us? So there, in general, their practices of mysticism were to plummet to, their inner beings, their souls, really, not just thoughts, but their souls, like all other mystics throughout long history, going way back before Christianity and so on, to go into your soul and rejoice with the creation of which you are a part. Okay, so that's that first period, and it included adjustment to the doctrine. Remember how Hildegard was so cheeky as to write to her archbishop and finally the Pope and say, because of my visions, you owe it to us to send us money. And and the Pope, Gregory, said, well, that's a good idea. It was almost as though she could use, but she was really careful politically. She could use her visions as her arms to say, I am carrying the right message and you must support it, even to her higher ups. Okay, to the bishop and the archbishop, and she was getting some protection too from Maximilian, who was the quasi emperor at the time, because of this competition between the church triumphant and the state. That is the, yeah, the lord and the overlord and so forth. So she had some protection there, and she was so clever as to use that just enough psychologically to dare to put forward her commands, really her demands, and in order to build her nunnery and people with the women, with her nuns, and to provide the work of their hands to their community. So there's a completeness there that we can certainly admire. And of course, it's quite wonderful to see the artworks that she did too. Okay, that's by way of some kind of reminder of what that period of the history is. Now, as I was saying, however, going into that period, about halfway through it, this change of mind is beginning to happen. I think in great measure, this is my thought, but I've read it elsewhere too, in great measure because of the severity of the doctrines of the church. So the classical mystics that we're coming up to right now began to move into that dark part of mysticism. And of course, the great work at the end of this period is St. John's, The Dark Night of the Soul. So take that as something that all of this is sort of leading to. It's not predicting it, but it's sort of leading to that. Anyway, so mysticism as a practice, as a behavior, was turning more and more deeply into inspection of the self, not only inspection of the self, but so much denial of the self in order to more closely approach God. That God is the great unnameable. And remember that. That's an idea that was way back in the early days of the development of Christian theology and the likes. Do you remember the Via Negativa? It was in, I think, the second class. So sometime be sure to, oh well, and it's also an appendix that you can pull out separately. I think it's Appendix B. B? Yes, I believe it is. Appendix B. Anyway, the Via Negativa, which is a term that is current as well. And all my Catholic friends certainly know what it is. And all people who are clerics and the likes are pretty familiar with that as well. The Via Negativa, this is dropping back now historically, that occurred in the thinking like a seed, like a mustard seed, maybe we could say, using a biblical analogy, way back in the time of St. Paul. And you will recall that one of his biggest converts in Corinth, though he was Athenian, was Dionysius the Areopagite. Kind of remember that name, do you? The Dionysius, who was a pagan, an Athenian, and he heard Paul on Corinth, and it converted him to Christianity, to study. Well, of course, that early, which is really the beginning of Christian mysticism. There's plenty of mysticism that precedes it historically, yes, but Christian mysticism very much started right there. Now, the Via Negativa is, boy, that's a really challenging idea or thought or belief. And that is a practice of religion, of the Christian religion, in which you cannot name God. The only way to know God is by things God is not. You cannot know God by descriptions of, quote, he is. Because
Hi, Joyce. How are you?
to do so, like God is great, God is good, all those nice things, nonetheless, just in saying them, that constricts the expanse, the endless expanse of God. It reduces God. God is eternal. And that, that means absolutely forever. To the extent that God is not created and never was created. God is God and will be for eternity. Also, God is omnipresent. So any name you see constricts that and reduces God to something less than what God is. So the via negativa is the frame of mind where you dispense with all of the nice descriptors that you might add to God, that he's good, that he's great, and so on. That's all very, very nice and well and good. But that's not God. In fact, it's a human superimposition on God. And it's out of that kind of thinking that come such images that are very familiar, and they're still used an awful lot, of who's God? Well, he's this wise old and often very gruff and angry guy sitting in a throne up there with a white beard, and so on and so on and so forth, commanding, you're not following the commandments, or you are, and so on and so forth. You see how that constricts God? So the via negativa is deeply in the mystical thinking right from the get-go, and voiced and written by Dionysius, the Areopagite. Remember, Areopagite is simply a name for a political council, a judicial council of Athens at the time of which he was a member. And that council's job was to consider decisions about moral and ethical issues that come up in the city-state of Athens. And that's what these wise gentlemen were to do, is to say, we're talking it over, we're thinking it over, so on and so forth. And then they offer their interpretations and understandings of the moral or the ethical way to behave, and the like. So that's how he gets that title. Now, oddly, remember, well, it's kind of odd, but anyway, it was 300 years later before his, that is the original Dionysius, his writings, which were in Old Greek, pre-Latin by far, were not translated over that long period of time until pseudo Dionysius came onto the world, into the earth, and started the translations of Dionysius, the first Dionysius. Okay, pseudo Dionysius, he's gained that title through history, though apparently nobody knows what actual name he had. But since he was the translator and the purveyor of the ideas, including the via negativa of the first Dionysius, apparently it was an honor to take the name of the person whose idea it was, and to honor that person by taking his, and it was always his, of course, his name, Dionysius. So here's pseudo Dionysius. Now, of course, we knowing about humans, it could be that he was also a plagiarist, but we're not going to repeat that too often. We don't know which way because we weren't there. Anyway, so pseudo Dionysius then translated into a later Greek form, and it became very quickly then it was also translated into Latin, which by that time was well formulating as its own language, certainly, and the likes, and then moved on from there. Okay, so that's how via negativa was like on a thin thread, has traveled along with Christian well, thinking and Christian belief and practice, Catholics specifically, of course. There were no other Christian practices yet at that time. There were some competitors, but let's not go there right now. uh, and that kind of thin thread carries on, and it obtains clear into the classical era of period 2 and beyond. It is still cited in many of the services and so forth in the Catholic Church. And Diane and I have heard it also uh, intimated, at least in the Episcopal Church and in the Anglican Communion. And apparently, though I don't know this authoritatively, any of the liturgical Christian practices like Lutheranism and the likes. Via Negativa it's not a main theme at all, like it is in the Roman Catholic Church when you really delve into it, but it is there. So here's this change of mind that is beginning to flow in this period, where you do not name God. Now, here's a poser. How do you contemplate God without naming God? Well, that's pretty difficult.
Yeah.
And another element that really appeared much, much earlier on in the first period, but now comes very much to the fore in the practice of mysticism, of practicing mysticism. And that is the apophatic versus the cataphatic. Remember that? That's in our third class, I believe. Okay. The apophatic practices are practices of entering into the mystical state without aid of any kind, including attempting to name God. You can't do it. You can't have candles and hymns going and lovely things, that cause you to bliss. That's fine. You bliss out. We've all experienced that before, to hear beautiful choirs, for example, in cathedrals and the likes. Nothing wrong with that. But the apophatic way says that's not possible, and to enter into the mystical state. So the practices of the classical, and there are more than just these four that I bring up in this section here, of course, many more, and the likes, is for total silence and the discipline that takes, which takes at least months. And as Meister Eckhart says, you'll be lucky if you get there in your lifetime. It requires actually years of most people to be able to dismiss all attributes given to God, and therefore giving yourself, your soul, over to that nothingness that is God. That sounds like a terrible paradox. Yeah, nothingness and darkness.
Mhm.
Okay, you see that coming down the pike at us here. All right, so this is a key quality then of the classical period, or not. Well, it's part of the period, the second period. It's the latter part. It's the classical era within the second period. All right. Any comments or questions on that so far, or corrections? And okay. All right, good. Oh, I knew this was an exceptionally bright class. You can just tell, Okay. All right. So, but it might, if you think about it a little bit, strike you as peculiar that I start with actually a sort of pre-classical. Well, he's bridging, of course, which is the great intellectual and theological leader of the Roman Catholic Church at this period, whom you can name. Yeah, who is that? St. Thomas Aquinas. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. This is 13th century. Yeah, 13th century. By 13th century, see, we've gone beyond Hildegard and so forth.
Almost right there.
All right, St. Thomas Aquinas. Okay, St. Thomas. Oh, what a brilliant, brilliant man. Let me see. Now I want to share the screen here, so I'm looking for it. Let's see.
Wow, this is
Bring
interesting.
that up. I bring that up. Now, where's my share screen? Anybody know? Are you seeing
Can you
this?
see us, John?
Yeah. What?
You can see us, then the share screen should be down on the bottom.
Yeah, it should. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, the
little
green,
icon.
the green share screen, or maybe it's blue. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems to be
Green.
off the page.
So just click on any of our pictures just to make sure you're on the Zoom picture in its forefront, and then look.
Okay, there he is. Okay, how about that little screen that you showed me one time?
Click the green button, and it should pop up.
Well, here it is. Now, is everybody seeing this?
No,
No. Oh, blast. But you saw the one before it, did you?
we have not seen anything.
No.
No,
So go back to your Zoom.
Oh, Jim, I just hate this. Maybe
all right.
someday.
We'll get you through it.
You will.
Click on my picture for a second. Can you see me?
No, I can't see it. All I can see are these giant
Then
faces.
go to
now.
go to the bottom of your screen and click on your Zoom icon.
Well, it's not even there. It's not on the screen.
Oh, because you've full screened your
Yeah.
PowerPoint. And
Oh, yeah.
so go up and
Escape.
yeah, push escape. That's right.
Okay. All right.
Now go down and find the Zoom icon on the bottom.
Oh, shoot. Oh, I'm sorry, folks. You're so
That's all right.
patient.
you're fine. You're fine.
You're fine. So just go down to the bottom and find the Zoom icon.
Yeah.
Right? The blue.
I'm trying, but I can't get it any lower. And it's not there.
You're trying move your mouse, and sometimes that'll make something appear, but it's not.
Yeah, just a minute. Now my emails have come up. Honest to Pete.
Okay.
Okay, let's see.
Ryan's gonna help him.
There we are. Okay, now I'm back to St. Thomas Aquinas again.
Yeah.
And I'm
Okay.
trying.
John, what you want to do is you want to go up to the PowerPoint that you see.
Yeah.
And click on the little line that just kind of gets rid of PowerPoint, not the X. Don't X it out. Just the little line that minimizes it and toss
Oh.
so that it's out of the way.
Where the heck is that little line?
I can't remember what color. It's one of the three buttons: red, yellow, or green. I can't remember which one it is on a Mac.
All right.
Well, now I'm back with you all. That's nice.
That's good. That's good. That's
Okay.
what we want. So now looking at us.
Yeah.
Move your mouse and go down to the bottom and find your share screen.
No, I'm trying. It won't move. It won't move.
It's like here.
The button, your mouse won't move.
It does not move the image.
Don't try to move the image.
No,
Do you have a
Yeah.
cursor?
just
Yeah.
use your cursor, John.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay, so now go down to the bottom of
Yeah.
just the Zoom window, and the green button should have come up.
It has not come up.
Share screen. He's got his right away.
There, I just clicked the Zoom button because I know what that looks like.
Yeah.
But it's not there.
Okay, so go down to the very bottom of your screen where there's all of the icons down there.
Yes, I've got that.
Click the Zoom icon, the blue one with the kind of camera.
Oh, wait a minute. Finally, barely at the bottom, I see share screen.
Good.
Okay. And then
now-
I click, yeah,
Now
I
click on your PowerPoint on there, and then
Yeah.
and then share.
okay, I click that and I click share.
Excellent.
There you go.
There you go.
but you clicked
Yeah,
the
but
wrong
what are you
thing
looking
somehow,
at?
John. Okay, end share.
What?
Share. Get
What
out
we
of
have
End
is,
share.
we have
Stop
some
share.
things that you
All
don't
right, I
want. Stop
stopped
share,
share.
that's right. So
Yeah,
what you've
okay.
done probably with your Zoom meeting is you've brought the whole window a little bit further down. So go up to the top of your Zoom meeting and the white
Yeah.
bar that's at the top,
Yeah.
and try to just move it up a little bit. And then that'll make the share screen come up a little bit.
What?
Does that make sense?
No, not really.
Hmm.
It's up all the way up. Let me try again here. I click. Ah,
Okay, so if it's all the way up, let me give you a different suggestion. Go
All right.
above it, and usually what happens is then you're able to minimize it a little bit because kind of this arrow pointing both up and down come up. And what you want to do is take the top edge and just bring it down a little bit so that you've got some room from the top of your window to the top of your screen. So that then you can take it and
No.
move it up. No?
no,
Do you want me to share my screen?
I guess I have to resort to that. Oh, I was determined not to have to
It's all right.
do that.
It's okay, John.
Well, ugh.
Okay, so you're
Okay.
sharing your screen again, John. So you've done that well, but what you're not sharing is you're not sharing the PowerPoint part of your screen. So go
I
back
know,
to the-
and I,
go back to the green
and
button again.
yeah, okay.
Okay, so now you've got the smaller window in front and you've got to look across and say, do you see the one that says PowerPoint?
No,
One of those windows should say PowerPoint.
no, none of them does. No, there's my PowerPoint. I brought that up.
Yeah,
But you probably,
that's not what you want, John.
that's what I thought. I was
You don't
going
want
to
to look outside of that small window, the share screen window. In that share screen window, there should be a square that says PowerPoint so you can share it. Okay, but you've got for sure PowerPoint up and running.
Did you put share screen? No, I never
Yeah, I
did.
put-
Okay.
I clicked share again, but it brings up this crystal clear audio, even if the lingo isn't. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, that's because that's the default thing that you're doing. So stop
Yep.
share.
I beg your pardon?
I'm just going to
Oh,
go ahead
stop
and share
share.
my screen, just so
Oh, okay.
we do that.
We just resort to this, yeah, for heaven's
Yeah,
sakes.
it's not a bad thing. We know how to
Yes,
do
it
it this
is.
way.
Yeah, it is. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, it is frustrating, but it's not a bad thing. We know how to do it this way.
Sorry.
Okay.
So,
Da, 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 da.
sorry, I'm
Jim was gonna share screen. Where is it? Choice.
share screen
Where's
and PowerPoint and enlarge.
Yeah.
There's St. Thomas Aquinas.
Okay, there's Aquinas.
Yeah.
What are you wanting to have?
I'm sorry?
This is what I have. Can you see my share screen?
Well, yes, I do.
Okay,
Yes.
so which one do you want it on? St. Thomas Aquinas?
There, St. Thomas Aquinas,
Okay,
right.
perfect. Away you
There
go.
he is.
Strange hair.
Okay, folks. Yeah, here is one of the interpretations of what St. Thomas Aquinas might have looked more or less like. Do you remember seeing this image before?
Yeah, last week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, right. A couple of weeks ago. It's because this particular image is just cranked in by any number of encyclopedias and books and so on, like a generic image of all holy men over a long period of time. I brought it up when we were looking at Johannes Scotus Eriugena, if you remember that name. Anyway, but that would not have possibly been true, because look at the architecture of the church that this friar is gazing at, and the hairdo, as somebody's, or hair don't,
Very careful.
as somebody's already mentioned. Yeah, this is an early Renaissance painting
Mhm.
It's not of the time of St. Thomas, which you can see 1225 through 1274. And the Renaissance wasn't until the 15th century in full bloom. But this is probably as close as we'll get as a look at dear St. Thomas.
Mhm.
Fantastic intellectual. Notice he's a little bit chubby, and that he was teased about that as a child. He had, now think of this horror, 8 brothers,
Oh. Mm.
and they gave him grief throughout his young life. I think he was the youngest of the family too, but that I couldn't confirm. Anyway, and he was chubby, and that was a reason for getting teased as well. But he was a very devout and conscientious student of the doctrines, very learned. And his contributions to not only Catholicism, but Christianity in general is just really remarkable. What he managed to do at this time was to eloquently describe the gift, the greatest gift of God. Okay, I had to name him so you know what I'm referring to here, of God to humans, is the ability to think.
Mhm.
And as therefore, and going along with that, of course, is mind and brain. So this is all a part of God's greatest gift to human beings. Okay, the church accepted that. They weren't going to say, well, no, he intentionally made us less than great and God and godlike and so on and so forth, especially with people so devout as Thomas. All right, as he went along, and this is in the text for chapter 4, which I sent out to you all. How he proceeded in his preparations for really an intellectual life, and that was the primary thing, was to forward the new change of mind and belief and occupation of the mind and thinking, that was God's greatest gift to us. Now, stemming from that came 2 other of his discoveries, shall I say, and pronouncements that really revolutionized the Roman Catholic Church. And still into this day, he is referred to as a very great mystic and thinker. In fact, philosophers in general, not just limited to Catholics by any means, consider him one of the 6 greatest philosophers in Western civilization. I'm not going to venture to who the others might be, because there's some discussion about that. But anyway, so because of his tremendous intellectual ability, and his writing was so eloquent and so within the guidelines of orthodoxy, that the church ecclesiasticals not only let him to continue, but promoted it, supported him to some degree. Okay, now just momentarily here, back to the bald head or the balding head. That's called tonsure, Tonsure. In fact, James, who's your classmate there, and I are totally tonsured, and that is voluntarily have our heads shaved. And it was significant to be tonsured when you are ordained. But nowadays, it's just a small patch right over the fontanelle in the top of the head. Okay, but for some reason, and I don't know why, this was the, I'm going to say fashion, but of course it goes beyond that. Now that's just a little sidelight. But anyway, back to, after this great discovery and pronouncement about God's greatest gift, then how he, in a sense, reconciles natural phenomena, which we all observe, with not just doctrine, but with mystical belief. How can that be reconciled? Because they've been at odds with each other for quite a while, and they still are, as we know, depending on people's points of view. Okay, and here's what these are the laws that he outlined. The universe operates by two separate laws. One by natural law, which we can understand with our intellect, and spiritual law, which is assessed or accessed by intuition and mystical insight and faith. Faith, that is, that the truth is here. It is not escaping, it is here. That's the idea of faith that was predominating in this thinking.
Intuition, faith.
Which is really much more what, expansive, shall I say, than the way we hear it nowadays, tiresomely. Oh, you've just got to have faith, meaning believe something that you can't possibly believe. It's not like that. It's deeply beyond that. It comes from a profound insight of the self, of the soul, in mystical practice. All right. And what he did was in a very real way reconcile the pagan philosophy of Aristotle with the Christian belief structure. You see, he was able to bring those together by, they are two separate laws, and to define them and describe them in such a way that they do not conflict and overlap. They are all part of God's greatest gift. You get the point there? So he's able to describe them that they are independent and without conflict, because they belong to the great ability to think and the well, we didn't call it the mind necessarily, but yeah. So
Was that a first?
well, there were antecedents to it. It was coming, but never so clearly stated. In fact, it is implied, now this is going back to the end of the first period, in the work of Johannes Scotus Eriugena, if you will recall a little bit about him. That was pretty dense philosophy, but he could not deny Aristotle's observations of a real solid world, and also felt that, well, if it's a real and solid world, then it is of God's creation. So you see, there's the seed that is moving along. Now that was some hundreds of years before Thomas Aquinas, but that little mustard seed has been there. Most of Catholic theology had been reconciling with the Platonists, with Plato's structure philosophically of belief. That one leads towards science more and more as it goes along through history, but it supports the developing Catholic Christian belief in, for example, the one, the first cause. Philosophers and scientists call it the first cause, or switch over to the other side, God. It is the one. Switch back to the coming scientific side. It's a black hole. Okay, do you see those parallels? Intellectual parallels. Now, Aquinas marvelously and eloquently removed the conflict between those two and demonstrated and convinced us and the church, it was revolutionary, that's for sure, that it is all the gift of God and cannot lead us to untruth. That is not possible because it's of God's creation. Okay, Well, let me see. Let me take this
Hmm.
off for the time being. Any comments about that? Let's see. How do I get this off now, Jim? Well, you have to do it, I guess.
Really important.
Yeah, so we come back to us.
Mhm.
Okay, any comments so far on this? Questions, objections, overruled? Oh, okay.
I have a question. When you
Yeah.
said spiritual law consists of intuition, faith, and what?
Oh, intuition, mystical insight.
Well, mystical insight.
Yes, and faith. So,
Okay.
yeah, whatever that profound thing of mystical insight is, we know that it moves toward nothing,
Right.
which is everything. Darkness. All right. Now, he did have a few, very few mystical experiences that he did relate. So we know he actually had some. One, when he was a young boy, he saw Mary, the mother, and she spoke to him and said, seek the truth, seek the truth. And this is what he
Oh,
did then. He committed himself to that.
wow.
Okay. And then at the end of his life, and this is sort of sad, but it's sort of wonderful as well. He was very close to death. He had quit writing his greatest work, which is Summa Theologica, which you can pick up in any library, maybe not any, in any case. And it was to be the comprehensive expression of theology for Christians. The Theologica, Summa, which means all and complete, Theologica. He didn't finish it. He stopped and said something that a couple of 3 centuries later, Santa Teresa said, oh, less words, more action. So I hope we have time to get to her because she's quite a character. But anyway, yeah, so he said, these are all just words. Well, what was he experiencing personally? Probably in the depth, or whatever we call it, of his mystical contemplations and meditations and so forth. He was experiencing the nothingness, even of words, of logos, as an access to the God that he sought, the first cause, the creator, the one who creates all and is uncreated.
Right.
Yeah. Now, just quickly, that's another thing that goes way back to Johannes Scotus Ariadne Jena. And I don't know if you recall or not, it's pretty opaque stuff in his philosophy, but he outlines 4 ways that you can deal with nature and its annoying reality and solidity. So and this goes back to chapter 3, if you're interested in that. Yeah, here's Johannes Scotus Eriugena. He was in 810 to 877. Anyway, and he's studying Aristotle, who of course was just, his whole philosophy was built on solid reality here and now type of thing. He's my favorite philosopher, incidentally. But Johannes, he reconciles the Neoplatonist doctrine of immanence, if you will recall that a bit. That is an explanation for how Jesus can be when God is inseparable. This is pretty kind of tricky stuff in a way, but anyway, an immanence, and reconcile that with the Christian tenet of creation. All right, now we can't take the time to go back over all of that, but that's in chapter 3 that I distributed. Anyway, so Johannes, he broke it down into 4 clarifications of nature. Number 1, that which things, that which creates and is not created. There's God. Okay,
Mhm.
it creates, but it is it is not created. Okay, we can grasp that. Two, that which creates and is created. Oh, that's different.
That is different.
Yeah. All right, what might that be? Well, he's looking at nature, recall, and maybe Jesus, maybe. Okay, that which creates and is created. Now that Jesus sort of fits that schedule in a way, doesn't he? I think. All right, three, that which does not create and is created. Rocks. I don't know. He breaks that all down and in his full writings, which I'm not prepared to just quote off the top of my head. And four, and this is the most opaque of them all, that which does not create and is not created. That
Say
sounds
that
like,
again.
Oh, yeah.
okay, number four, that which does not create and is not created. That sounds like nothing to me.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm not prepared to explain fully what that is. Yeah. Anyway, so he was, of course, really working to find out how to get the eminently reasonable philosophy of Aristotle to work together with Christianity as it was evolving. So that was a start. Well, anyway, think of that as another mustard seed that is traveling along with our kind of collective consciousness as people, and especially entering into the practices of the mystics, that which is created and or that which is not created yet creates. Okay, that works and so forth. Now, not to spend too much time on that, but that is a very important concept. Okay, and here it is. It's working into the thinking and the practices of the mystics of the classical period. Because now, after Thomas Aquinas, but they overlapped, was an equal, virtually an equal intellectual, and that is Meister Eckhart. You've all heard his name, I'm
Yes.
sure.
Yep.
He's sort of a favorite of a lot of people. He seems to be pretty dour, but anyway, we can look at a picture of him too. I've got that on the PowerPoint. So anytime, Jim, if you could bring that up, why we'll look at an interpretation of who Meister Eckhart was. Here he cometh. He cometh. All right, and here he is. He's number 2.
Right there.
Ta-da. All right.
Hmm.
Rather dour looking, yes,
Mhm.
but he has lilies. He has flowers around him, and there are stories behind that. This is, again, is an early Renaissance painting. It's not contemporary of Eckhart, but it's representing symbolically how his thought and his love and belief really flowered and was of the flowers. So let's just take it at that. Okay, now he says that education and culture were the 2 driving forces behind Europe. Well, no, this is a later commentator. Were behind European urban development in the 13th and 14th centuries. You see, urban development, the cities were developing, and things like universities and libraries were appearing rather rapidly. That might be surprising to some people that far back, universities began to appear and really thrived. In fact, older than this. The earliest universities were in the 1000s. Okay,
Wow.
then here this commentator says, among the mendicant orders that had settled in the cities were the Dominicans. okay, dedicated to promoting their teaching, their way of life, and preaching the ideal of man's self-discovery, which can be said to be twofold. Now catch this, and this is in the text if you want to refer back to it. On one hand, man discovers himself by liberating himself from himself and therewith finding in himself
Yeah.
what transcends him.
Ah,
You follow that?
Mm.
Oh,
No.
this really
This-
speaks to the extreme depth of this searching of the soul in nothingness, in darkness, to obliterate yourself, to take the extreme position of contemplations on nothingness and of nameless God's
That doesn't make sense.
creation without any aids, without any candles, without any chanting, so on and so forth, so that you can remove yourself from yourself. Obliterate wouldn't be the right word because that sounds destructive, and that's not the intention. It is to be, well, not rise above either, but I'm sure you get a feeling for what this is talking about. The kind of thing. Actually, it is a major idea, theme, element in 20th century mysticism, which we will come to next week. So hang on to it. Okay. Let's see. Man discovers himself, liberating himself from himself, and therefore finding in himself what transcends him. Wow.
Liberating.
Then, on the other hand, what man finds in himself displays its own movement as all that remains when his self-discovery has reached its end. Movement. Oh, you've heard Pastor Jim and David refer to, and we all like the phrase, we thank God that we move and breathe and have our being. Move. Well, sure. That's on a mechanical level. We know that on the of this earth type of thing. We move, we walk, we turn over, we so on and so forth. But think what has preceded this particularly with Thomas Aquinas, but of course, even before him as well. Movement is a reference to thought, to thinking. We have movement, meaning the capacity of our brains, of our minds, of our souls to move and expand beyond the things of ordinary self. So that's the significance of movement, as all that remains when his self-discovery has reached its end. Okay. Well, we'll put that in our pipes and smoke it a little while. All right, any comments on that particularly? All right, well, Thomas Aquinas and many others, well, there have been 36 in the history of the Catholic Church, 36 mystics who've been declared doctors of the church.
Really?
Which is a special kind of honor for those who have written so eloquently and spoken so eloquently about the faith that they are declared doctors of the church. St. John of the Cross is a doctor. Santa Teresa is a doctor. Certainly Thomas Aquinas, and many others going clear back to the origins of Christian mysticism, but not Meister Eckhart. He was too much on the edge of heresy, or so the ecclesiastical councils felt. So he was called before a council and said, explain yourself. You are in dangerous area here of being a heretic. He wrote a very long defense, and of course eloquent. As I say, he was intellectually, he was the peer to St. Thomas Aquinas and the likes. Sadly, before the council met to pass judgment,
Right, I gotta
he
go.
died. So he died before he was able to be read, and it became a moot point. Any suppression of what he wrote was impossible because the libraries and the universities already had his writings and his thinking. And you know how dangerous universities are. Uh, so students might actually think for themselves, and professors.
Mm,
Yeah. Okay. So he was never made a doctor of the church. Incidentally, his first name was Eckhart, and his full name was Eckhart von Hochheim.
Oh, my.
But Meister
Oh.
Eckhart do. See, he was
Okay.
he was a Dominican teacher and so on, and that hence the Meister, and that has stuck with his name. Okay, so all right. Well, I do want to move on, though he's certainly fascinating. Jim, if we might see the next one, Jan van Ruysbroek. Okay. All of these classics, classical ones, were not Aquinas, but he was Italian. But Van Ruysbroek and Eckhart and many others are called the Rhineland, mystics, because they lived in that area and preached and taught throughout that area. Now, Jan van Ruysbroek was Flemish. He was born in Brussels, and he's an amazing contrast in this way, and this is why I include him. He was very retreated. He liked quiet, particularly he liked things quiet. And he was a friar, and then he was ordained fully, and so on, because his preaching was so lovely, and his congregation or people gathered to hear him and be uplifted by a very hearty, loving expression of the creation. So, and yet he was a mystic. Where he went in his mystical practices within himself, I haven't discovered. I'm sure that there are doctoral dissertations or something written on that, but I haven't had time to go through those. So anyway, he did practice, and he and another friar from the cathedral in Brussels left because it was too busy. There was too much to do, all the doctrine, so on and so forth. And they went into a retreat in a local forest, and he spent the rest of his life there, communing with quiet, with the quietness of nature, of darkness, of night. But he did continue to preach, and people were drawn from all over the Rhineland, up into Germany and so forth, the whole Rhine area were drawn to him because of that, and because his deep personal insight was that we have an active life, he called it. And that active life is the one that is given and devoted to our fellow human beings. Okay. So here's a person who's almost a recluse, and yet he has a profound feeling of our duty, but it's love, for the love of humankind, and therefore serving the community around there and humankind, in any case, the sick, the ill, the disadvantaged in any way, and so on and so forth. And his 3 words that commanded his whole opus of sermons were compassion, mercy, and pity. So there was no being ashamed of pity, not to his mind, and maybe not at all in those days. Nowadays, we kind of go, oh, pity, don't pity me, and nobody wants to be pitied, and so on and so forth. No, that's a spiritual state, and with it comes an action. Pity for, no doubt he was seeing beggars in the streets and so on and so forth. Compassion, mercy, and pity. So here is a mystic who is empathic. Now, it's a 20th century concept, well, maybe 19th century. Empathy and to be an empath. I expect you've all heard that before, that some people either claim to be or attributed with being empaths. That is, born with a capacity for identification with others. It's the opposite of sociopath,
Okay.
to be an empath. He is now coming back into general knowledge and popularity. Jan van Rysbroek, I think within another 10 years or so, you'll be hearing his name more often because the new theologians and the likes are really pulling his sermons and so on back. I think it's quite exciting, really, to find out more of that profound insight of his as a mystic, and then emerging with what we must do, and that is our compassion, mercy, and pity, and the active life that acts on those. He is an empath, so to say. Okay, it's kind of a relief. Not that.
Would his would the people that would have listened to what he had to say, would it been any different than it would be today?
That's a good question. I'll have to kind of feel around on that in my own mind. Maybe not. Considering the general misery of living circumstances of his time, maybe it was just a relief to hear a preacher say, we have compassion for you, and there's food and clothing in the courtyard, help yourself, or something like that. Nowadays, it's a very, well, what shall I say? Well, I don't know. I was going to say it's interpreted intellectually and actually factually. That is, look at how many churches, certainly St. Francis is among those, that spend a great deal of whatever resources we have, which is us primarily, on service to the community. All of the nonprofits that are so valuable to the life of the community, of which you know there are many, food, clothing, and so forth. And that's where our St. Francis part jumps through and beyond the, well, not really beyond quite the classical part, but like, okay, folks, let's get down to business here, and we serve our fellow human beings. That's so, yeah, we're related. Of course we are, with his followers and ourselves. Yeah, I'd sure like to think that for sure, that we are an empathic people and have it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that there would be a certain segment of society that pity would be stigmatizing.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mentioned that too. You know, pity is a word that's for lesser people, and either to receive it or to give it. It's demeaning it's demeaning to pity somebody, which is ridiculous, really, when you think about it. Of course.
It's more about compassion.
Yeah. Compassion, and certainly mercy and pity.
Mhm.
Yeah, Marilyn, were you going to add something to that?
No, I just agree with that totally.
Yeah. Well,
And I
that's,
think St. Francis, it's a good model too.
oh yeah, that is the model of St. Francis.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank the good Lord, whatever his or her name is. There ain't any names.
Is there a Lord?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to be sure to give at least thumbnail sketches to Saint Teresa and John of the Cross. They are very profound and different. Can we roll it on then to, yeah, here's Santa Teresa of Avila.
Oh, Saint Teresa, Santa Teresa.
Probably many of you have seen this. This is in the St. Peter's Basilica in
Beautiful.
Vatican City. There are something like, what did I read? 11 images of St. Teresa in the St. Peter's Cathedral. But
Wow.
this is very much a center one. It's done by a Baroque artist, and that is 1600. So that's a good deal later. This is not a medieval statue. And you can see that because of the lush, beautiful curves and
Mhm.
the beatific look of the, actually, that's probably not a cherub. It's probably a seraph, though I've called her a cherub. And here's St. Teresa. She's in her trance. And the angel has just withdrawn, most people think, the arrow from her heart.
Mhm.
And that arrow is the arrow of God's infinite love.
Hmm.
And this follows very much the kinds of things that she wrote. Now, she was a taskmistress, you know, she was the head nun of an order, and I have this written in the text, you'll be real interested in it, that broke away from the established order of, oh, come on, John, your mind's starting to get a little bit hazy here. All right, it'll pop into my mind here. Carmelites. You've heard that name at least.
Yes,
And
yes.
there's a whole history, of course, a very fascinating history of the Carmelites, who went through some pretty radical changes of their own. And she broke away from the main run of it and actually didn't move ahead in a way. She went back to the rules that were imposed in 1209.
Hmm.
That our order has become lax and not practicing as it should. And along with going back to the rules of 1209, and I can't remember who the Pope was at that time, anyway, included that flagellation once weekly,
Wow.
prayer all day, every day, or virtually at least 7 times a day, prayers. And these were chanted prayers. They were not, you know, free form prayers. It was very, what we would call severe. Well, this is another side of Santa Teresa. Maybe it isn't another side. She was that self-disciplined herself. And she felt that the nunnery, that they had become way too lax. They were wearing, for example, covered shoes, meaning they didn't have bared toes anymore.
Hmm.
So, and she said, nope, we wear sandals. So they wore sandals.
Hmm.
And she said the New Age, the Pope had recommended this during her lifetime, and time as the prioress of the nunnery, and also that habits, which are of course the rough material, they're not like our modern habits at all, like sackcloth, had become long, so people could skirt along with their closed-toed shoes and have these long gowns. She said no, open-toed sandals and shorter
Really?
habits. Yeah, back to I mean, 1209. And that
Hmm.
was, that kind of discipline, right down to how they would dress and present.
War.
Yeah, yeah. But she was real clear about things religious. She was a taskmistress. And remember, this is at the very beginnings of the Renaissance. So we've skipped along pretty far in the classical period. And this is really significant, she was, and so St. John, Spanish. This is a major mentality different from the Rhineland mystics.
Hmm.
The Rhineland mystics followed so much of the intellect. Okay, not at the expense of their devotion. That was genuine. But you go to Spain, and what do you get? Passion.
Hmm.
So her writing, and some
So
of,
she was passionate.
yeah, she's. Well, let's see if I can quick turn it up here. You'll enjoy it where she says, "Oh, words, words, words. Come on, less words, more action." Meaning,
I saw that. Yeah.
yeah, washing the floors of the church, and discipline. Let's see, where is that? She says, quite frankly, though she became a doctor of the church. Well, no, that was after she died. Let's see. Oh, heck, I didn't. She said, all of your theology is wonderful and amazing, except that I can't tell the difference between spirit, soul, and mind. She said,
Hmm.
what's the difference?
Interesting.
Yeah, isn't that great? Spirit and soul. And she said, oh, I'm not even going to think about it anymore. But
It's
she
all
said,
mind.
what it adds up to is ecstasy.
Okay.
There's a clue. I think Marilyn has discovered where that is in the text. Anyway,
Mhm.
ecstasy. Now break that word down, and it means out of body.
Mhm.
Okay, ecstasy,
Mhm.
out of body, ecstasy. Well, and here it is depicted too, of course, by Bernini. Her ecstasy, she is out of body. That's a clue, perhaps, to what her mystical experiences were. She went so deep as to go out of body and out of everything. And she was in the presence of the one, never for more, she said, never for more than about 20 minutes. Nobody can come back from it if it's longer than that.
Hmm.
That's what she claims. So when she came back each time, it was after a journey of incredible pain
Wow.
and horror and fear. And yet she pursued and pursued. You see, the soul is throwing off all of itself. Now, remember that phrase from Meister Eckhart of overcoming yourself in order to discover yourself. Well,
Mhm.
here it is in terms of passion. Her passion of experience was to go so far as to have no self, which means that she could not rely on herself. She didn't have one anymore to come back to this earth. And yet she does. And the only thing that can bring her back is God's love. That's the arrow being withdrawn from her heart.
So she kind of lost herself. Is that what you
Oh,
mean?
oh yes. Oh, yes. She disappeared.
Mhm.
So the depth of her experience was very deep indeed. And that's very Spanish. It's all passion. She says, oh, forget about the words. It's ecstasy.
Mhm.
Yeah. The Rhineland people had broken apart all the, well, what's the soul and what's the spirit and all of that, those layers and so on. Okay.
How would she know that it was 20 minutes?
Yeah, I wondered that myself.
Yeah, does she have a watch?
Please, I'm sorry. Was it 20 minutes? Oh, it's 19 minutes. I better get back.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that was added in by some scholars after her
I-
time because,
I think so.
yeah, probably. But anyway, she did say it was brief. And
That I can accept.
yeah, yeah. And then others had said, well, apparently it was about 20 minutes.
Even brief is a sense of perception,
Uh-huh. Yes, yes, indeed.
and it's spatial, I mean,
Yeah, 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 that's right. And that's wrong. That closes in creation and God. Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's via negativa to the nth. Complete.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, let us move on. We've got a few minutes. Well, very short. Jim was good to let us go over a little bit on Tuesday. So let's quickly go to John. All right, The Dark Night of the Soul. He and Teresa worked very closely together. They were a very good match. You might say a match made in heaven, but it was celibate, definitely.
Mhm.
And they helped and supported each other. Though he was 27 years younger than she appointed him to be the spiritual guide and confessor to the nunnery that she formed of the nuns, that the breakaway nun society, and they had contact throughout their lives. Then he was the first one to form a male nunnery under the principles that Saint Teresa established for her nunnery. So, and of course, his astounding great work is Saint John of the Cross. It has come, The Dark Night of the Soul. It has come to be known. Actually, his original name for it was just The Dark Night.
Mm.
The of the soul was added at some time later by an editor, but it's appropriate. It doesn't throw anything off, because the book is about, and it's all in quatrain poetry. I wish I read late medieval Spanish because I can't. I read that it just soars with poetry, but of course I can only read English translations of it, and that's pretty good. But and very briefly, and then we can pick it up. You can pick it up in the text more.
Mhm.
He was a loner. He was even kidnapped at one point and imprisoned by the other nuns. And
My goodness.
yeah, for eight months. And then he climbed through a little hole in the wall and ran away. And he suffered terribly while he was imprisoned. He was tortured and fed only water and bread and so forth. And yet his soul, I would say, found the highest praises for God in that poem. And it's not just namby-pamby stuff. It is the journey of a soul in the manner of a mystic, step by step, book by book. He calls them books. There are 14 of them. He describes poetically what it is to do. It starts with the 7 deadly sins. The first one is pride, to inspect himself so deeply that he removes pride. And it's painful, because it doesn't just mean bad behavior in the street with other people. It means the deep pride that we carry with us as human beings.
Mm.
And you have to think about that a while and go, oh my gosh. The second one is avarice. Avarice. Now, again, we can think of that on a ordinary pedestrian level, so to speak. And that is, miserliness, greed. Yeah, it's that. But He talks about the soul being greedy for its place in life and its
Hmm.
action within you.
Hmm.
Ah, that's pretty darn deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it goes on through the rest of these, and each one is a book on its own that is quatrains of poetry, soaring Spanish poetry. It's considered one of the greatest works of Spanish literature, as a matter of
Wow. Hmm.
So I got to wrap up, but let me, can we look at the next picture, please? All right, this is a drawing that he made between 1575 and 1577. Nobody knows the date and it's not dated. An overhead view of the crucifix.
Wow.
There is no precedent for this throughout the history of Christian mysticism up until his life.
Hmm.
What is that full of?
Hmm.
My God. Uh, and of course, the suffering is so visible.
Can see it. Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with the Grunewald Christ, which is a painting that is in a small town in France now, which is a medieval painting of a very grotesque Christ on the cross. And you see him straight on and full, and St. Barbara and Mother Mary and so on and so forth around him at the base. And it's so twisted and grotesque. It's a masterpiece, but it is an example of a direct attempt to tell us that it is of suffering.
Mhm.
Now,
And how do you believe Christ died?
art critics, and over me, have observed in this drawing, this kind of rough drawing in many ways, this isn't telling us that in that way. This is suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you see that? I buy that. So we have to take it that this is the suffering that he himself, as the soul moving toward God gradually, is suffering. Okay. Whoa. All right, the last picture, and then we'll have to cut it off. Fast forward to 1951. Salvador Dali, you know his.
Dali.
Yeah. Now I have a mistake in the text. I said that this painting is as seen from overhead. Obviously, this is not an overhead view like the St. John of the Cross one is. It's from below. But this was inspired by that drawing by St. John of the Cross.
Hmm.
So, of course, Dali's mind is obscure, but the cubes and then these floating squares, kind of three-dimensional squares, what are those?
What
Is
do those
Christ,
mean?
I beg your pardon?
What do those mean?
Yeah. I think it's up to us. And the individual looking up is perhaps contemplating that. One interpretation I've read is that possibly those are the nails that are leaving his body.
Oh, wow.
And he is rising. Notice too, he is a very whole young man. He's not a a skeleton and grotesque like the Grunewald Christ in that was painted in the Middle Ages.
It makes him look strong.
Yeah, and beautiful.
Yes.
And he is rising to the, at least this is an interpretation. Dali refused to interpret for anybody. Is rising to the beauty of creation. And the nails become abstractions and they float away. And the cross becomes abstraction and
It
floats
doesn't
away.
say who she is.
Isn't that fascinating? Now, a lot of people object to this. They think it's sacrilegious. Well, I don't.
I think it's just another depiction of it.
Yes. Yeah. how we people, we humans, contemplate these enormous
Mhm,
concepts and beliefs of ours.
mhm.
Well, well, and with that, I'm going to have to wrap up. I've used you the whole hour and a
Well,
half.
it was very informative, John. Thank you.
Well, good. I hope so.
What history?
A lot of history.
That's yeah, I crammed a lot of stuff in here too. I don't know if we've lost anybody,
That's good.
yeah, well,
I'm not sure.
this, and that doesn't matter. I would go on anyway. Uh, yeah, this was a better rundown than the Tuesday class. So there.
Good.
So think of that. Well, folks, remember I invited people to have, if you want to make an offering to next week's classes, a closing week finally of classes, of if you come across something in any of these mystics, doesn't have to be any of these, it can be others, and you want to share, well, that'd be great. I have 2 people so far that have volunteered to do that and are excited about it. One will be reading some things from one of our current mystics who's very popular right now. I'm not going to name that person, but who writes really wonderful things and is a genuine mystic and the likes. And the other one is a surprise. It's going to be a mystic
Hmm,
that we have not looked at.
hmm.
And that this individual is undertaking this one. So this next one, and I'm not going to give it away. All
Okay.
right. So just let me know if you come across something. And
Okay.
all right, thanks, Jim, for letting me continue on an extra 5 or 6 minutes. And thanks again for rescuing me again. Maybe I'll learn how to do this yet. All right.
For just a second, I got some ideas about maybe what happened. So
Yes.
John, stay on when everyone else leaves.
Okay. Okay. I'll sure do that. I do try.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, John.
All right. Love to you all. Thank
Love
you.
to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Judy. Oh, you look, whoa,
I did.
like,
That's-
you look like Cleopatra.
I'm a little bit tired, so I'm just deciding to lay down while I listen to you, honey.
Well, all righty.
You have a good one, John.
Thank you, dear. Good night.
Good night, honey.
All right, so John, what we have to figure out is once you try to go to it, the past 2 weeks, somehow it's made it so it doesn't show up. So what
I
we have to
know.
do is we have to make sure, first of all, that your PowerPoint is up and running.
Yes, I checked that right before we
That's to
signed
show that
on.
it's there.
Oh, yeah, it's there. It's both in my,
Is it-
yeah.
Is it put away or is it behind the Zoom screen? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you mean. Now, I had it behind the Zoom screen when I tried to get over to it with the share.
And so when you hit share,
Yeah,
same as like last week, it sounds like you only had a couple of things, but not everything that was open. Like I have all kinds of stuff, all kinds of stuff that I have open is there for my options
yeah.
of what I can share. Go across, push your share screen button, and then tell me what all's there.
Okay, share,
In the
the
middle.
share screen, right, I got it. All right, all I've got is this little fixture that's surrounded in blue with you, and it's a static picture, it's not moving. And the whiteboard, the pad via AirPlay,
Yeah.
iPhone pad via cable, Safari post attendee, that's the darn thing that kept coming up even though I didn't click it.
Yeah.
And the Microsoft Word tax filing.
That's it. And
That's it.
you don't have another button that says more?
No. Would that be down
No,
low?
it'd be one of the same similar boxes.
Mhm.
And that
No.
just shows that you have more stuff, more than the number of boxes that it typically shows. So that
No,
then you can scroll down.
absolutely not.
And
It's-
PowerPoint is still up, but it's not showing it.
Yeah,
Try this, John. Well, click out of this, out of the share screen,
well,
close
let's
that
see.
box.
Well, wait a minute.
Up there should be an X on the box somewhere. Okay, and then just now just click out the stop share.
Yeah, okay, here we go. Yeah, the share screen and stop share.
Stop share.
Okay,
So now close out your PowerPoint.
close it out. Okay, well, I have to unveil it. Oh, well, that's Zoom there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting rid of it. Where's my PowerPoint? Well, maybe it's already gone.
That
Oh.
that might be why, because maybe you closed it before. All right.
No,
So
I'm
open it up. Open it up again.
okay. Here it comes. Yeah, it's on my dock and it's in my desktop.
It's not enough that it's on your dock or on your desktop. It has to be open. Okay.
Well, see,
So you can see the PowerPoint presentation in front of you right now.
yes, I can. So
Okay.
you see, of course, I interpret that as being open.
Yeah, that's good. That should be true. So now go down to your Zoom again
Yes, you mean the blue icon with the camera in the middle of it?
so that you can see me again, because I just, always want to be seen. That's
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I got you.
all right. And now share screen and see if PowerPoint shows up now.
Yes, it does.
Okay, see, so for some reason, I don't know why, for some reason, you must have closed out PowerPoint in some way or another. And so if it does it again, next week, our first guess will be to go and start PowerPoint again,
Uh-huh.
okay? And then
Yeah,
hopefully it'll show up like this.
so can you tell me why this now appeared very nicely in this?
Because you opened PowerPoint. You
And
made-
yet,
you made sure that PowerPoint was open, and maybe you thought it was open before, but remember when right when it started, I said something like, just put PowerPoint away. Maybe
Yeah.
you stopped PowerPoint at that point, right?
well, I don't remember it that way, but it might have happened. Okay, I had it behind the Zoom.
Yeah, our first default will be, if it happens, we'll have you go and ensure that PowerPoint is open. And then we'll try share screen.
Yeah, well, at 6:30, I turned PowerPoint on.
Yeah.
Checked it
Some point-
through and had it up, and then I added Zoom over that.
Yeah.
And